1 minute ago, the silence in London wasn't broken by church bells, but by a tremor that shook the very foundations of the House of Windsor. You didn't just watch a routine royal health update or a glossy PR statement. You watched a carefully controlled system reach its absolute breaking point. A king and his heir are reportedly standing in the shadow of a move they never saw coming. Princess Kate has dropped the mask, and in doing so, she has shattered the palace machine's ability to control the reality we've been fed for months. This wasn't just a headline. It was a personal declaration of independence from a woman who holds the emotional center of this monarchy. For months, the gray suits behind the palace gates have been operating on a script of secrecy. We heard the same polished lines: privacy, space, recovery. But silence in a family is one thing. Silence in a public institution funded by the taxpayer is quite another. I've watched this pattern in every fragile institution that is more afraid of the truth than it is of a scandal. They didn't just manage the optics, they tried to control reality itself. While the world looked for reassurance photos, Kate was reportedly preparing a move that would bypass the courtiers entirely. This is the moment the fairy tale monarchy officially died. Kate hasn't just updated her medical chart, she has rewritten the rules of the game. By taking charge of her own narrative, she has exposed the content gap between the palace's polished lines and the fragile human honesty the public actually craves. This wasn't transparency. It was the truth being dragged out, because the princess refused to be a prop in a variety show any longer. The palace always wanted to keep the stage backdrop perfect, but Kate has just pulled back the curtain to reveal the cracks in the walls. She has forced a system that lives by protocol to finally admit it is mortal. 1 minute ago, the silence surrounding the Princess of Wales was finally decoded, not by a royal decree, but by the weight of the institution's own failures. To understand the power move Catherine just executed, we must first look at the months of calculated silence that led us to this precipice. It began with a surgery described as planned and successful, followed immediately by an eerie, total disappearance from public life. There were no reassurance photos, no hospital visits caught on camera, and certainly no transparency. This wasn't an accident. It was a strategy of silence, used as a shield for information management. You don't keep canceling a future king's schedule for nothing. When William suddenly pulled out of major engagements, citing personal matters, the palace machine doubled down on the narrative that everything was under control. But as the weeks turned into months, that silence transformed into a crisis of trust. In a family, silence is a private matter. In a public institution, it is a catastrophic error in perception management. The palace tried to sell the image of a perfect family recovering behind closed doors, but they underestimated the public's ability to recognize a system at its breaking point. The privacy shield was being used to delay an uncomfortable truth. We were fed polished lines while the gears of the institution were grinding to a halt. By refusing to provide a minimum level of transparency to the taxpayers, the courtiers inadvertently fueled the very conspiracy theories they claimed to despise. They didn't just manage the optics, they tried to control the narrative until the last possible moment, ignoring the fact that dignity is earned through honesty, not through staged photos or vague communiques. The cracks were widening, and Catherine knew that the palace spin was no longer enough to save the crown from itself. 1 minute ago, the whispers from within the sterile corridors of the London clinic evolved from concern into a full-blown institutional rebellion. While the public was being fed a narrative of a planned and successful surgery, the reality behind the gates was one of unexpected complications and rising panic. I've watched this pattern in every fragile institution that is more afraid of the truth than of a scandal. And the British monarchy is no exception. Behind the polished mahogany doors, a war was being waged not just for a princess's health, but for the soul of the crown itself. The turning point came with a single, devastating breach in the palace's wall of silence. A reported email with the subject line, "She deserves more than silence." This wasn't just a leak, it was an internal confession that the palace machine was failing the very woman who humanizes it. The conflict pitted Prince William against a cadre of old guard advisors who were obsessed with protecting the optics at any cost. These courtiers used privacy as a shield to delay an uncomfortable truth, prioritizing the stability of the image over the reality of a human life in crisis. You don't lose sight of a princess for months by accident, and the inner circle knew it. The leak revealed a deep-seated fear that the everything is fine narrative was finally collapsing. When a king's court is more worried about bad headlines than the well-being of its future queen, the institution ceases to be a family and becomes a cold, unyielding komai. This internal strife was the catalyst for Catherine's ultimate power move. She saw that the palace spin was not only failing the public, but was actively suffocating her own recovery. The mask had to drop, because the weight of the secrets was starting to crack the foundation of the throne itself. 1 minute ago, the most guarded secret in Britain was finally unveiled, not by a whistleblower, but by the king himself. To understand the magnitude of Catherine's current power move, we must return to the night the palace's wall of silence was shattered from the top down. King Charles, a man who has lived his entire life within the rigid confines of protocol, did the one thing his advisors feared most. He looked past the image to see the collapse of a human being. When he entered that hospital room, he didn't see a future queen. He saw a fragile woman being crushed under the weight of an institution that values polish over the beating of a heart. This was the moment the king decided to break the palace machine. Despite fierce protests from his courtiers, men obsessed with managing perception, Charles reportedly struck the table and uttered 3 words that changed the future of the monarchy. No more hiding. He had seen the true cost of the secrecy he had once allowed. A princess struggling alone in the dark while the outside world went mad with rumors. I've watched this pattern in every fragile institution that views silence as strength. In reality, prolonged silence is poison. Charles realized that if the crown is to survive the 21st century, it must stop pretending to be invulnerable. This wasn't a calculated media strategy, it was a desperate confession. By overruling his entire court, Charles admitted that the palace's crisis management had failed miserably. The right to privacy they had fought so hard to maintain had become a trap against them. The king understood that a modern monarchy cannot exist in a vacuum of truth. The decision to let the world see the princess's struggle was the first time the system admitted it was mortal and far from eternal. It was an admission that even an ancient institution, with all its power, can bleed, and that the only way to revive it is to step out of the shadows and face the harsh light of reality. 1 minute ago, the invisible border between the Prince of Wales and the palace's old guard, the infamous grey suits, was permanently erased. To understand the depth of the power move Catherine just executed, we must look at the visceral reaction of the men who have spent decades controlling the crown's image through a lens of artificial perfection. For these courtiers, Catherine's move toward raw, unfiltered honesty wasn't just a breach of protocol. It was an act of institutional treason. They had spent months building a fortress of no comment and business as usual, only to have the princess herself set fire to the blueprints. I have seen this internal warfare play out in every decaying institution, where the leadership outgrows the bureaucracy. William's role in this shift cannot be understated. Reports from within the inner circles suggest a prince who is no longer willing to sacrifice his family on the altar of optics. The grey suits wanted a puppet. They got a protector. The rift is now a chasm. William has reportedly begun bypassing the traditional communication channels, establishing a direct line to the public that favors the princess's well-being over the palace's prestige. This is the monarchy reset in action, a cold, calculated dismantling of a communication strategy that was designed for a different century. The courtiers are terrified because they have lost the one thing that gives them power, the ability to gatekeep the truth. By allowing the world to see the cracks in the royal facade, Catherine and William have rendered the palace's spin doctors obsolete. They are no longer asking for permission from the advisors. They are giving orders to them. This shift in gravity represents a fundamental change in the hierarchy of the House of Windsor. The palace machine is grinding its gears in a vacuum, while the future king and queen are speaking directly to a global audience that values authenticity over artifice. The old guard isn't just sidelined. They are witnessing their own extinction. They are realizing that in the new era of the crown, the only currency that matters is the truth, and they are bankrupt. 1 minute ago, the palace realized that the greatest weapon in their arsenal wasn't a crown or a scepter, but a simple wooden bench in Windsor. To understand the brilliance of the power move Catherine has just executed, we must decode the tactical brilliance of her vulnerability. This wasn't just a medical announcement. It was a masterclass in emotional warfare. For centuries, the monarchy has survived by being a remote, untouchable symbol. Catherine, however, realized that in the age of digital transparency, distance is no longer a strength, it is a liability. By sitting alone on that bench, stripped of royal finery and the usual palace backdrops, she created a direct, unfiltered connection with the global public that bypassed every courtier in the building. I have analyzed institutional collapses for years, and the most successful recoveries always involve a human pivot. Catherine didn't just tell the world she was ill, she invited the world into her struggle. This created an emotional shield that is now impenetrable. When you are that honest, when you allow the world to see your fragility, you render your critics powerless. How can a tabloid attack a woman who has just spoken about the shock to her young children? You can't. By weaponizing her own vulnerability, she has effectively neutralized the palace's traditional media critics, and, more importantly, she has neutralized the gray suits, who wanted to keep her behind a veil of secrecy. The palace machine is shocked because they cannot control an emotional bond of this magnitude. They are used to managing loyalty, which is a cold, transactional duty. Catherine has cultivated empathy, which is a volatile, powerful force that answers only to her. This is the ultimate power move. She is no longer just a member of the royal family. She has become the primary asset of the British state. The institution is now entirely dependent on her survival, not just for the line of succession, but for its moral legitimacy in the 21st century. She has turned her greatest personal crisis into the monarchy's only hope for a future. This isn't just recovery, it is a hostile takeover of the crown's emotional narrative. 1 minute ago, the term remission became more than a medical status. It became a political weapon. Catherine didn't just announce she was cancer-free. She announced that the old version of the Princess of Wales was gone, and a new, indestructible leader had taken her place. This is the remission reset, a cold, calculated rebranding effort that has left the palace's old guard scrambling to keep up with a woman they once thought they could manage. While the media celebrated the good news, the strategic minds within the institution recognized it for what it truly was, a hostile takeover of the crown's future. For months, the palace tried to sell us a story of a fragile recovery. They wanted the public to wait for her return as if it were a return to the status quo. But Catherine realized that the status quo is what nearly destroyed her image during the months of silence. The power move we are seeing now is her total refusal to return to the old protocol of hollow smiles and meaningless handshakes. Reports from the inner circle suggest she is now handpicking her future engagements with a level of scrutiny that has terrified the traditionalists. She is no longer interested in being the palace's perfect asset. She is becoming their commander. I've analyzed institutional turnarounds for years, and this is exactly what a high-stakes leadership pivot looks like. By controlling the timing, the tone, and the visual language of her return, she has signaled that the future queen will not be a passive symbol. She is centering her platform on the one thing the palace has always feared: raw, lived experience that the public can actually relate to. The gray suits are used to managing symbols, but you cannot manage a woman who has stared down her own mortality and come back with a direct mandate from the people. The courtiers are watching their influence evaporate in real time. In the past, they would have decided when and where she appeared, crafting her image to fit their narrow definitions of royalty. Now, she is the one setting the terms. This is the ultimate institutional leverage. The monarchy needs her more than she needs the monarchy, and for the first time in history, the Princess of Wales is making sure everyone behind those palace walls knows it. She isn't just back at work, she is taking over the building, and she is doing it with the quiet, chilling precision of someone who no longer has anything to fear. 1 minute ago, the geopolitical center of the British monarchy shifted from the cold, stone halls of Westminster to the digital screens of 3 billion people. To understand the true scale of the power move Catherine has executed, we must look beyond the borders of the United Kingdom. This isn't just about local popularity. It is about the global influence war. For years, the monarchy has been under siege from a rival narrative originating in California, a narrative of grievance, victimhood, and modernization through destruction. But with her recent raw honesty, Catherine hasn't just defended the crown. She has reclaimed the global moral high ground and effectively marginalized her rivals. I've analyzed the shift in influence markets for a decade, and what we are seeing is a total narrative wipeout. By choosing the path of vulnerability and quiet strength over the path of loud accusations, Catherine has rendered the California strategy obsolete. The world no longer looks to the Sussexes for the truth about the palace. They look to Catherine for the truth about the human spirit. This is a massive strategic victory for the House of Windsor. She has effectively colonized the emotional landscape of the United States and the Commonwealth, proving that a future queen can be more relatable than a celebrity royal. She didn't fight them with PR, she fought them with reality. The palace's old guard are stunned because they never believed a British princess could compete with the high-octane PR machines of Hollywood. But Catherine did something the Hollywood machines can't replicate. She used authenticity as a tactical weapon. While California offers produced, polished content designed for profit, Catherine offered a shared experience of illness and recovery designed for connection. This has shifted the balance of power. The monarchy is no longer seen by the global public as a rigid, unyielding institution, but as a family led by a woman who understands the struggles of her people. This global mandate is what gives her the ultimate leverage to dictate terms to the courtiers at home. The global impact is undeniable. Brands, world leaders, and international organizations are no longer just looking to the king. They are looking to the Princess of Wales as the primary representative of British stability. She has become a sovereign of sympathy, a role that carries more weight in the 21st century than any constitutional title. The grey suits in London are realizing that their power is local, but Catherine's power is universal. She is the first royal to successfully bridge the gap between ancient tradition and modern, global transparency. She didn't just save the monarchy, she globalized its relevance. 1 minute ago, the invisible ink on the British Constitution began to rewrite itself, marking the birth of what insiders are now calling the Shadow Regency. To understand the true magnitude of Catherine's power move, we must look at the reality of the hierarchy within the House of Windsor today. While King Charles officially wears the crown, the functional gravity of the monarchy has shifted. The center of power is no longer the throne room at Buckingham Palace. It is the quiet, strategic headquarters of the Prince and Princess of Wales. This is a bloodless coup, executed not through force, but through a total monopoly on public trust and moral authority. I've analyzed the mechanics of institutional leadership for a decade, and what we are witnessing is the emergence of a dual sovereignty. Charles has the title, but Catherine and William have the mandate. The king's own battle with illness created a vacuum of visibility, a vacuum that the palace machine tried to fill with old-fashioned secrecy. Catherine's power move was to step into that vacuum with a level of transparency and strategic poise that made the old guard's methods look like ancient relics. By taking control of the narrative, she and William have effectively sidelined the king's advisors, ensuring that every major decision now passes through their filter first. The Shadow Regency is defined by a total lack of permission-seeking. In the past, the Prince and Princess of Wales were seen as supporting players in the king's reign. Today, they are the directors of the play. Reports from the inner circle confirm that the communication strategies for the entire institution are now being modeled after Catherine's Windsor bench strategy. The courtiers are no longer setting the agenda. They are reacting to the pace set by Adelaide Cottage. This shift in power is permanent. The monarchy has realized that its survival depends entirely on the popularity and perceived honesty of the Wales family, giving Catherine the ultimate leverage to dictate the terms of her own royal service. This isn't just a transition of power, it is an evolution of the office itself. The Shadow Regency is leaner, more digital, and far more connected to the pulse of the global public. By allowing Charles to remain the ceremonial figurehead while they manage the institutional reality, William and Catherine are ensuring a seamless transition that has already occurred in the minds of the people. The mask of the subordinate royal has been dropped forever. Catherine hasn't just recovered her health, she has claimed her position as the most powerful strategist in the history of the modern crown. The palace is no longer in charge, the future has already arrived, and it is speaking with the princess's voice. 1 minute ago, the history of the British monarchy didn't just turn a page, it closed the book on 1,000 years of artificial distance. To understand the true legacy of the power move Catherine has executed, we must realize that she has done more than just recover her health. She has fundamentally altered the DNA of the crown. This is the new era of truth, a permanent shift in the social contract between the sovereign and the people. For centuries, the monarchy survived on mystique, the idea that they were a separate, untouchable class of beings. But Catherine has proven that in the 21st century, mystique is a weakness, and honesty is the only true currency. I have spent a decade analyzing the collapse of traditional power structures, and the lesson is always the same. Institutions that fail to adapt to the demand for transparency do not survive. The palace machine, with its obsession with secrecy and gray suit protocols, was leading the monarchy toward irrelevance. Catherine's decision to speak directly, to show her vulnerability, and to bypass the traditional gatekeepers has set a precedent that can never be undone. The public no longer wants a fairy tale. They want a mirror. They want to see their own struggles, their own fears, and their own resilience reflected in the people who represent their nation. The gray suits are mourning the loss of the old world, but Catherine is already building the new one. She has transformed the role of the Princess of Wales from a ceremonial asset into a moral authority. This is the ultimate institutional reset. By placing her humanity above her title, she has ensured that the monarchy remains relevant to a generation that values authenticity over artifice. The Shadow Regency we discussed isn't just a temporary arrangement. It is the blueprint for the future. Catherine and William are no longer just waiting for the throne. They have already redefined what it means to lead. The era of never complain, never explain is officially dead, buried under the weight of a wooden bench in Windsor. In its place is a new mandate: be real, be honest, and be direct. This is the only way the crown survives in a digital age of instant scrutiny. Catherine didn't just save herself. She saved the institution by forcing it to breathe the same air as the people it serves. The palace is no longer a fortress of secrets. It is a house that has finally allowed the light in. The mask is off, the truth is out, and for the first time in history, the monarchy is truly, undeniably human.